Okay, so the INmune drug failed. This is the primary endpoint. The gray line, it actually favored placebo, so the placebo beat the drug very slightly. So pretty amazing result there. The Cohen's d value is a traditional statistical measure of effect divided by standard deviation. So even half a standard deviation is probably even, imperceptible to patients. So this this kind of result is really modest. So for CDR sum of boxes, which slightly favored the drug, and even NPI, none of this is really helpful at all. There's a subgroup analysis so that that you can ignore that subgroup, because obviously the problem with the subgroup is there's an equally bad subgroup that goes in the other direction. So yeah, well, you thought the release was 8 a.m. Well, Shkreli's releasing it now. How about that? Okay, Shkreli's releasing it now. All right. Is there a bid ask in the 24-hour market? Does anybody know? It would be nice to see the bid ask.
Martin,
Hey.
hey, on slide like
Yeah, let's
23.
check that out.
Oh, sorry, you're going
No,
page
go
by
ahead, go ahead.
page.
Yeah.
No, I like they're gonna like it looks like a spin job type presentation.
Yeah,
Like
well,
clearly the primary was not met, they're gonna say they don't put p values because obviously they were horrible.
I
Um,
mean,
but
this
um,
it
but
really
I find it
couldn't be any
oh
worse.
go ahead.
It really couldn't be any
Yeah,
worse. I mean, I don't know how
yeah,
you
it's
could spin it.
horrible. Uh, they're gonna say, oh well, we're gonna enrich for this
Well, they already enriched.
population. Okay, that's true.
So
No,
well,
they really have to enrich. Now
well,
they
what's
need
funny is
two bio.
even with the subgroup analysis, this 0.27 EMAC subgroup analysis is terrible.
Right.
That's
Oh yeah,
that's also not stat sig.
that's a good point. That's a great
Yeah.
point. Yes.
So it'll be at 1 very soon.
Yeah. Congrats.
Yeah, congrats to everybody. We got it right. Um, the CDR sum of boxes, really, really bad result there. But again, I would not take the subgroup with any. I doubt they would be interested in continuing to waste money on this, because the subgroup results are pretty modest, and again, that's without error correction and things like that. I mean, you can dice any number of
Yeah, I mean, they just put the Cohen's d in it. Isn't point 0.5? Like none of them are even
yeah, none of them are close to a
close to that.
reasonable Cohen's d value that would be any good. But again, in subgroups, these aren't even impressive subgroups. Like, look at CDR sum of boxes. The subgroup's actually worse
Yeah.
than
And
placebo.
that's the one that's actually used more often.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's pretty much over for INmune. Really terrible call by some of the people out there, confusing and misleading people when we tried to make it clear that this was like the overwhelmingly likely outcome. Shout out to everybody in Shkreli Court, Z55, Aquaman, all you other guys. Um, it's pretty terrible, about as bad as it can get. I think the only way it could be worse was like really big active harm, but this is just I would say inert, placebo-like. Um, yeah, if you could sell it or short it right now, I mean, I would. Um, yeah, there's not much you can do on the spin, because remember, the One, I mean, for spinned results, like when you spin and when you try to do data dredging and get a good subgroup, usually you come up with something that looks good. This is, not something that looks good. This is like, I mean, look at the CDR sum of boxes. If you
I mean,
replicated
it's
this,
horrible.
you would not,
So,
you would not get, you would not get FDA approval. Same thing with EMAC. It's not a perceptible change. So a really terrible result. And again, anyone can take a data set and drag it through the mud until you find the best possible subgroup. But yeah,
they
I
clearly
think it'll
tried.
trade to 50 cents, to be honest. I mean, there's nothing left here. And I don't even think they're making a full throated attempt, quite frankly, to defend the subgroup. Like the rest of the slide is really about the other drugs the company has. And, they're not trying to say that, by the way, this thing is really toxic in injection site. Like, this is not a drug you can give over and over again. But in any, it doesn't matter because it doesn't work. But, it's a very clear, yeah, it's funny. Consistent absolute effect sizes. Well, consistently zero, yes. Um, A beta positive patients. I'm pretty sure all of them should have been A beta positive. So I'm a little confused by
Yeah, it was
that.
like, yeah, they needed like one of three biomarkers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit silly. I know that they changed it from one to two, so now the subgroup is two, and they quote
Yes.
unquote amyloid beta positive. Well, every person alive is amyloid beta positive, so I'm sure they found some cutoff that try to tries to get it to work. I think 50 cents. I mean, there's no reason this should trade at cash or above cash. Clearly, management's going to be in the doghouse. They, um, have not found anything that really would impress anybody. Most biotechs are trading at below cash. So, like, these guys, if anyone should be trading below cash, that's they should too. I don't think management would advance this drug, right? Like, there's no reason to repeat this. This is horrible, horrible data. You know, you would not want to, do this trial again, even with the blue subgroup, which is obviously highly misleading. When you design a trial and you think it through, and then the placebo beats your drug, it's time to give up. um, there's not much else you could say. I mean, it's kind of stunning.
And
Um,
which
you
snake
put your
oil exactly are we talking about?
you put your best people on this. You spend 10 million bucks. You enroll a trial around the world, and your primary endpoint, a placebo beats you. I mean, that is just really, really remarkable. Um, Remarkable failure. So, the subgroup, again, is not very compelling because the effect size of the subgroup is not very good, and we know a lot about subgroups here. These subgroups don't tend to replicate when you do them again, and that's because they were not a priori pre-specified.
Right. That's the key.
Yeah, so when you try to do a subgroup, all of a sudden everything vanishes. The drug works in men. Okay, let's do a study in men. Oh, it turns out it worked in women. Let's do a study in women. And it's just a 50-50 coin flip over and over again. Um, so really amazingly bad data here. Um, Again, would caution people to understand the history of subgroups in biopharma. They've really almost never worked. I would say 99% of the time. Um, and it's just a way to save face, to try to just get a way to, I don't know, be feel like you're not stupid. And reality is the right way to do this is to just report the primary endpoint, the p-value, and the amount. And that's not what they did. The only thing that counts is that this number right here. Make it clear for everybody, just because this is so important. This primary endpoint is everything, and it's the only thing that really you can hang your hat on and say is real. It's what you spent your alpha on, as we say in statistics, and there's really nothing else other than this that you need to know about this study. I mean, this is just a waste of time. Everything else here is a waste of time. It's just a sideshow. The only thing that any serious person would consider is this p-value and this delta. The delta is 0.05. The p-value we don't know, but it's, I'm sure, close to 1. And any attempt to sort of whitewash the data by excluding patients basically just means that you're going to find a group that arbitrarily outperformed, but that means that there is another group that arbitrarily underperformed. And by excluding the group that arbitrarily underperformed with the knowledge that they did, you're not selecting this at random and saying, all right, well, let's blindly look at some hypothesis. You're looking for the group that did the best. And in every group, in every study, in fact, you can go to Excel and try random numbers, and you'll find some group that did really, really well. I've done this on stream before. We made a fake clinical trial and did random numbers, and you could easily find a group of people, in our case, a simulation, that outperformed. But the reality is you have to, be very careful when you make inferences about this. And the primary endpoint here, again, when you design a clinical trial, you bet your company on it, you invest a huge amount of money. I feel bad for the company. I think they should have known better. I feel bad for the investors, who definitely should have known better and should have listened to all of us. But yeah, the placebo doing better than your drug is basically a time to just stop. There's no reason to think that you're going to find the group of people that are going to do better, because if some group does better and the mean is 0, let's just say the mean is 0. Let's give them a little bit of, the mean is not 0. The mean is better. But if you found some group here that has that performance, that necessarily means, because the mean is 0, that there's a group that has negative performance. And unless you can explain that, for example, you could buy, you shouldn't, but you could theoretically buy, okay, well, we found people that really have high inflammation. Well, very well, but inflammation, right? But then why did these guys get worse? If these guys did better, then correspondingly, this group would have to do just as bad for the mean to be 0. And in fact, the mean here is negative. So a really, really terrible result here. And again, don't be confused about this subgroup, because again, if you believe that, okay, well, that sounds reasonable, high inflammation patients, they must have done better because this drug is anti-inflammatory. Well, maybe, but the patients who didn't meet this definition did worse, because the average has to equal, 0.05, around here, around 0, basically. So for however good this group's done, the better it does, in fact, the more this group has to be bad. And you could buy, well, high inflammation patients do well, but what about low inflammation patients? They do worse? Does that make sense to you? And the average patient, basically nothing happens. So again, we've seen this movie before 100 times with data dredging and things like that. Again, I see the stock going to 50 cents or a dollar because, you know, this yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, I don't really. I think their effort to spin is pretty limited. It's a half-hearted, don't look stupid effort, but it's a really pitiful result because in CDR sum of boxes, in fact, placebo still beats this enriched group. So explain that, right? Explain that. And then on NPI 12, well, the problem is this delta, right? Both groups did well, but also remember that a Cohen's d-value of 0.1 or zero 0.2 is basically zero. I mean, so what this means, just for anybody who's curious, is if you have a scale, just let's pretend this is a pain drug for a second, okay? And the pain scale is 1 to 10, all right? And you're treating patients, and maybe the average for the drug and placebo is 7. It's well randomized. Placebo is 7, and drug is 7 when it starts, and placebo drops to, I don't know, let's say 5, and drug also drops to 5. And the standard deviation is, let's say, 3. Well, Cohen's d-value of 0.1 is literally 0.3 on the scale. So it would mean that if you had a 0.1 advantage, that you would drop from 7 to, say, I don't know, 5.3 versus 7 to 5.0. It's not exactly a big win. And again, that's with a subgroup. So really hard to sort of digest that size of effect. Even in the best case scenario, it's basically a placebo. This is not a perceptible difference, 5.3 versus 5.0, for example. And again, Cohen's d-values tends to be a little confusing, but it's a really valuable thing because I think most people in medicine think that one standard deviation is like a fairly good, I guess in this case, maybe standard deviation would be 2, but in any event, so this would be even worse. But, the point is that, one standard deviation, if you can take my pain from, say, 7 to 5, now in pain trials, the placebo and drug generally get better because people feel better regardless of what they take. But really what you want to see in a situation like this is you gain one standard deviation. So your drug goes from 7 to 3 or 7 to 5 for placebo, and your drug goes from 7 to 3, and your delta is this 2 benefit. And this delta is what we're measuring against the standard deviation that we saw. And that standard deviation, usually you want a Cohen's d-value of 1 or higher, but even something like half, I've seen half can work. But it has to be stat sig, it has to be pre-specified, it has to be rational, and we don't have anything close to that here. I mean, this isn't even remotely close. When you ask me, how did you find this data? Let me tell you something. I'm Martin Shkreli, okay? You're not me, you'll never be me. I'm somebody that has a lot of resources, a lot of power. When you try to pick a stock, you're guessing. When I try to pick a stock, I fucking know. Do you understand me? Now go away, go close, press the X button, go to sleep, okay? It's not for you. You're a child. Anyway, yeah, I think it goes to 50 cents because why? I mean, if you bought the stock praying that this thing would go up 10x or 100x, well, I have news for you. It's not, and most people don't want to sit and wait and pray that the company will do something else. But I think it's very clear. I mean, they are not going to be developing this drug any further. I mean, they don't have the cash. It's just not something that, is going to really be that relevant. Yes, the trial failed. The market opens at 4 a.m. The call is at 8. I'll be streaming the call. I'm sure the press release will be out soon as well. But obviously, this is a disaster. If you were watching and paying attention, they updated their corporate presentation, but then they re-updated it again. They took it off. But if you're quick,
Oh, they did?
yeah, if you're quick, you got it. Um, so yeah, they just raised 19 extra, but remember they spend 6 a quarter, so they roughly have 19 right now, which per share is less than $1. It's like 75 cents, and usually stocks like this trade below, below market value. So we'll be celebrating all day tomorrow. One of the things that we're going to do is make sure that the people who pumped this stock and pitched it as long will not be forgotten, even though they'll never invest in biotech again. I'm sure blaming, a rigged system or something, but we will make sure that we keep this up, because next time this happens, we want to make sure, that you don't lose money. We want to make sure that you don't get hosed listening to the wrong people. And, for binary events, I don't think we've lost yet. So, in my career, I've batted pretty well on these. And this is just another notch for me. Again, the MITT here of 200 is very curious, because that's not, 208 was the amount of people enrolled. Like, you're supposed to do the ITT. So even the fact that they're doing MITT is very squirrely. And look at the immune reactions. It is a mutated protein. So you can see that, a huge amount of patients just can't even take it. So they're also likely to be unblinded, given the injection site reaction happening in almost every patient, but none in placebo. Good chance that even with that not seeing an effect is really remarkable. Yeah, I think we see 50 cents or $1. It's really, there's nothing left here. Any questions, comments from anybody?
How's the lawsuit with Levi going?
Well, they haven't sued them yet, but I'm sure they will. But that's not really that relevant.
This is
They have to spend money on, most companies have D&O insurance, so that's probably one of their bigger expenses.
How long do you think it's gonna last for this company to even remain in business?
A lot of the, biotech companies kind of never die. They reverse merge, and they do things like that. So like, it's pretty typical for there to be a, reverse merger or some other way to continue surviving.
in
I
terms
know
of
people
safety.
that
Oh, sorry.
I know
Go
people
ahead.
that make monthly income off of the reverse stock splits on all these biotech companies. They just have many.
Okay, any other questions?
Did you take a
In
look at
terms
that?
of the safety, um, the X Pro, these are elderly patients. Do you think an 80% injection site reaction is these people have fragile skin, and just seems a little high compared to placebo?
Yeah, I noticed it in prior studies, and it is really a remarkable thing. I was thinking about this the other day. I was taking a walk with my girlfriend and thinking about different recombinant proteins that one could theoretically make, and I remembered the attempts to make these gout proteins. And if you know anything about one of the famous gout drugs, pegloticase, is insane, injection site reactions. Now you can mitigate these by taking like different antihistamines and things like that. But like generally, when you give a mutated protein, the immune system thinks something is wrong, that it's potentially a foreign protein or something like that. So, it's sort of kind of what
That makes sense. On the next slide, you see the hypersensitivity is like 30%.
Yeah, it just reminds me of that drug, pegloticase. It's just brutal to take because you form an immune response to it, and you will also eventually going to form antibodies to it. So that's what's happening. It's not an injection site reaction because it's acidic or something. It's an injection site reaction because, the body says no more. So, you had decent sized withdrawals here. And again, they removed these from the analysis, it looks like, or tried to. But, no success on their part. Again, the CDR sum of boxes is not working even after this insane post hoc enrichment tells you that they didn't have much going in the way of post hoc enrichment. This is really kind of sad. And again, I think that you can't fault the company for taking a shot, but I do fault all the promoters, who kind of ignored reason and experience and all this stuff and gave a lot of false hope to people who, mostly individuals, who probably collectively lose, 20 to 50 million is my guess. So those people, should be ashamed of themselves. And, thankfully not that many people listen to them. But, I think that, anybody listening to them, I feel bad. And we tried to warn them in their Discord, but, they blocked us, including some of you guys, but me too, just for having the opinion that this drug wouldn't work. Well, we were right. They were wrong, of course. And I think anybody that refuses to just discuss something, I think is, just intellectually dishonest. And again, maybe being paid by the company or whatever it is, So just something that, really is disgusting. The company's, the company had a thesis, it was not the worst thesis that I've ever heard for a drug. It was not a good thesis. If you looked into it very deeply, you saw that basically this trial had been done before a few times, surrogately, and the mechanism didn't really make a lot of sense after you considered it deeply. At first it's not a bad thesis. So, the company wants to do a trial, that's fine. But, I think to prey on people to get funding, that's the part that we can do something about by being a good community, by working together to analyze these things. Everyone brings a little bit of knowledge and experience, and we come up with a conclusion. And, again, you don't have to agree with it. Market, that's what makes a market. But I think to shut out other people's opinions, is really bad behavior. And we have to try to make sure that we don't do that. But of course, when people jump into biotech for the first time, they get excited. And if they're in their second or third time, they get the Dunning-Kruger effect where they feel like they're experienced and successful. And I think you have to ask yourself a simple question. If that person were so good at picking biotech stocks, why aren't they getting paid to pick biotech stocks? There's a lot of rich people out there that want to make more money. People like Steve Cohen and Israel Englander and Ken Griffin. If you're really good at picking biotech stocks, word will travel, and one of those guys will say, well, here, let me give you $1 billion and you can pick them for me. But, the people that are proposing these things haven't worked on Wall Street for 5 minutes, let alone, in a high position like that. And that's why we trying to give you a little bit of insight. Well, in any event, Alzheimer's is very tough to